Hello and welcome to the editorial analysis of The Hindu. Today we shall be discussing the editorial of the 27th of April. So coming to the first article, lessons from a military encounter. Now the context here is with regards to India-Pakistan relations and how is it important to maintain communication channels between India and Pakistan for betterment of bilateral relations. So some issues that are important here have been discussed in the editorial. Coming to the first issue is that of some lessons which need to be learnt from history. Now the editorial here is highlighting that historically the relationship between India and Pakistan is what has been tense. But to control the tensions between both these countries, there is one lesson that needs to be derived. That time and again it has been communication channels or backdoor diplomacy between these two countries that have been taking place, which has resulted in often de-escalation of tensions and somehow sustenance of a neutral relation, or for that matter not very much downgrading of relation between India and Pakistan. The historical examples that have been given here are the Kargil conflict that has been talked about. Then after the parliament attacks, that is in the year 2002, again it was backdoor diplomacy, back channel talks that helped in de-escalating tensions. Also the back channel talks were what continued during the regime of UPA 1 as well as during UPA 2, and that time if you will see and you will analyze that the situation in Kashmir and the tensions in Kashmir that are existing today were not something that was seen during this particular time, and this was largely because of the negotiations that were going on between both the countries. Next is the issue of back channel talks. Now here what is important is that these talks are what take place without the limelight of the media, and also in these talks there is an option of moving back on hardline stance. What happens is that when media scrutiny is what is there, or what public scrutiny is what is there, then especially in cases of countries which are already belligerent with each other, the public emotion is such that often hardline stands are what the governments have to take under compulsion also. But in back channel talks, what happens is that there is an opportunity to step back for both the countries, and this is being away from media limelight. This is something that does not adversely impact the governments. So in that case, the importance of back channel talks is tremendous here. So that is what has been discussed. Next, in the aftermath of the Pulwama attack, there were Balakot air strike that was done by India, and there was largely a military standoff that did take place between India as well as Pakistan. But the problem here was that during this particular time when relations literally spiraled down and the tensions were what escalated in the entire subcontinent for that matter, at that point of time the talks between India and Pakistan were negligent, or rather minimalistic at this point of time. And it has been mentioned that since there was no channel for continuing talks, it was that the chiefs of RAW as well as the chief of ISI had to actually broker talks with each other as to what will be the repercussions if the pilot from India will not be returned. Such are the issues which have been highlighted in the editorial. So this is something that is extremely unprecedented, because the intelligence chiefs of both these countries are not supposed to discuss matters of political importance. So what should be drawn as a lesson from this particular military encounter is to resume back channel talks between India as well as Pakistan. Next, what is important is a key word, which is conflict de-escalation mechanism. Now this is what the editorial is advocating, that after this particular military standoff, this is the lesson which needs to be learned, that a de-escalation mechanism between both the countries is what should exist, and rather this should be something that should be stable and it should not depend upon the political environment within these two countries. So that is what is important. Next is the issue of communication channel. Now here the editorial is giving us some facts that largely the communication channel between these two countries comprised of the DGMO, that is the Director Generals of Military Operations. But this is what has not been followed up for some years. Also, because of absence of post of National Security Advisor in Pakistan, the NSA level talks are also what are not taking place. They have also been suspended. Also, next are the High Commissioners from India in Pakistan as well as Pakistan's High Commissioner in India. But the issue again here is that these high commissioners were called back to their countries. So high commissioner level talks were also what was suspended. So all communication channels are what were ended, or what are at present strained, is what has been discussed here. Next is the issue of political mileage that is being drawn. Now here the editorial is discussing that what is happening is that because there is no proper medium or no proper channel of talks, the talks are what are taking place at a political level. And whenever talks are taking place at a political level, we can always expect the political parties to extract some political value out of this particular sensitive sensitive issue, which has also happened in the present case. The attack of Pulwama, what were followed by extreme anger in the country, and as a result of which it is being accused that the government played upon this, and it carried out these Balakot airstrikes primarily because of the pressure from the citizens in India, and as a result of which this is what is something that has affected the 2019 elections, is what is being discussed at several platforms. So this kind of political milieu of such sensitive issues is something that is unwelcome and that is unwarranted. And in the absence of a proper channel, this is what exactly happens. The sentiment of the government becomes to teach Pakistan a lesson. This kind of a rhetoric is what is being heard in the election campaigning by several political parties. So this is what is indeed a cause of concern. The next issue is that of the third parties. Now obviously if two countries are not talking to each other, then they have to take the help of third parties. This also happened in the recent standoff between India and Pakistan, where US was involved. US brokered a deal between India as well as Pakistan, it is being expected. But now you have to understand that the players have increased. So not only US, China has stakes, Russia has stakes, Saudi Arabia has stakes, UAE has stakes. So as a result of which, what is happening is that a lot of mediators, a lot of third parties are entering a bilateral conflict. And you should know that for India, this is a very, very sensitive matter. India has time and again believed that India and Pakistan issue is a bilateral one, and India has always refuted the idea of third parties entering into this issue. So this is one thing that is important, that all these parties that are entering are also entering with their own agenda. They have their own interests. So this is something that opens up the issue for examination to other foreign countries, and this is indeed an unwelcome step for both India as well as Pakistan. So in this light also, it is important that both the countries establish a channel of communication. Next, what is important is the need for reinstating talks. Now this is something that needs to be done between India and Pakistan after the recent military encounter, and also an example of the Cold War is what has been given. Now this was one of the biggest standoff that took place between USA and the then erstwhile USSR, and even in this particular case it was seen that despite the extremes of the tensions that were existing between the two poles, it was eventually that these poles had to speak to each other for coming up with an arms treaty, or for that matter several other issues. So channel of communication is what has always been important in the history, and this is the lesson that India and Pakistan need to learn. So this is the entire analysis of this particular article. Indeed, the article is largely talking about one issue only, which is opening back channel talks between India and Pakistan. So this is one idea that you need to replicate in your answers as a solution to de-escalation of tensions between India and Pakistan. India-Pakistan, as I've told you, is one of the most important topics for international relations, and this idea is somehow something that you should bring about. So that is the importance and relevance of this particular article. Coming to the next article, competing for the best. Now the context here is with regards to attracting global faculty in Indian universities. Now some issues in this context are what are important. The first issue is that of brain drain. Now the editorial here is bringing to notice that a lot of Indian academicians or Indian talent is what is going outside India, and it is there that these people from India, Indian diaspora, is teaching in American universities, or for that matter other foreign universities. Some examples of what have been given: for example, the Dean of the Harvard Business School is an Indian, the Dean of the Harvard College himself is an Indian. So this is one thing that is a major concern for India, that a large part of brain drain is what is happening from India. Next is the issue of the flagship programs. Now this is something that you should have an awareness about. The government has started several flagship programs, such as the Global Initiative for Academic Networks, that is the GYAN, then the Visiting Advanced Joint Research Faculty, which is the Vajra, as well as the Scheme for Promotion of Academic and Research Collaboration, which is SPARC. You should make a note of all these important schemes for attracting the faculty from foreign universities back into India. So these are the flagship programs of the Government of India. Next, what has been discussed in the editorial is the case of the IITs. Now here it has been discussed that in the IITs, in all the IITs of India, only 40 teachers collectively are of foreign origin, and this is less than 1% of the faculty of the IITs. So this is something that is a concern for India, because IITs represent one of the topmost educational institutions of India. And even in these institutions, the faculty that coming from foreign is very much minimal. So that is indeed a cause of concern.
Also, as per Institutions of Eminence scheme in India, there is a requirement that allows for 20% of foreign faculty. So even despite such kind of schemes by the government, India is unable to attract foreign faculty, and that is what is a cause of concern. Now next is the issue of international academics. Now here you need to understand that the commissions who are there in international universities, they are largely of two types. One type are the established academicians. These are the ones who are settled, they are earning well, and it is difficult to attract them to India because they would, for their own compulsions, would not prefer to dislocate themselves. Then there is another category which are the youth scholars. Now it is this particular category that still can be attracted because they are comparatively more mobile. They will be looking for jobs, and these are the ones who can be attracted. But largely the benefit of attracting them is not so much because they will not be able to bring the work culture largely that is there in foreign universities. So that is one issue that has been discussed here. Another category here are the academicians of Indian origin. But what is being seen is that despite several schemes by the government, despite several incentives by the government, they are unwilling to come back to India. So what are the issues because of which they are not coming? Now the first issue here is the culture of Indian universities. This is something that is not competent to the foreign universities, and this is what requires a complete overhaul. It is then that probably such kind of academicians are what will get attracted towards India. Next is the structure as well as the governance of Indian universities, which has always been criticized. There is a lot of political interference that is there. So these are some issues that are a cause of concern. Also, the scale of salaries in India is somehow very much less as compared to the foreign universities. Indian teachers are not, or Indian professors are not earning as high as the remunerations are in foreign universities. China, for that matter, is offering very, very high remuneration, which is attracting a lot of foreign faculty into China. So this is something that you should know about. Next, what is important is that research funding in India is not adequate. Also, the research scope is what is limited in India. The resources available are what are minimal. So these are the few reasons because of which India is failing to attract foreign faculty into India. Next is the issue of private institutions. Now, the editorial is highlighting that despite the fact that it is difficult to attract foreign faculty in government institutions, what is being seen is that some private institutions in India, some private universities, have been able to successfully welcome some foreign academicians. Not only this, they are doing this primarily to attract foreign students also. So in this context, this model of private institutions is what needs to be replicated by the government institutions. The salaries that they are offering are what we need to offer in government institutions, so that largely a large amount of foreign faculty is what is attracted towards India. So that is the entire gist of this particular article. The topic is important vis-a-vis education system in India. So in that context, questions from this area are what you can expect. So that is the relevance, and that's about our discussion today. The PDF for this particular discussion is what will be available on our Telegram channel. The link for the same will be in the description box. So that's about today's discussion, and thank you all for watching the video.